Earnings from Hims and Hers for the second quarter of 2025 are finally out, and there was a lot to go over. So I'm going to dig through all of the earnings reports today and the conference call. Really, this was one of those earnings reports where I think if you were a short-term investor, there's not a lot to like. Revenue growth was not all that impressive, at least in the core business, as they're kind of calling it now. That doesn't include GLP-1s and some of their weight loss products. But the long-term strategy seems to still be fully intact. And I think they're actually moving forward at a really fast pace with things that could disrupt the healthcare industry. Now, as a long-term investor, as an asymmetric investor, that's what I'm focused on, is that long-term. But it's pretty understandable that the short-term results were a little bit disappointing. Now, the market's reaction has been fascinating. Stock was down about 10, 12% in overnight trading. And you can see here that shares actually went positive for at least a little while this morning, now down about 6% as I'm recording. So the market doesn't quite know what to think of this earnings report. And as we go through this, I'll kind of explain why that is. Depending on your time frame with Hims and Hers, depending on what your expectations are for the company long term, it's pretty understandable that this was a fairly confusing report. But let's dig into it. My name is Travis Hoium. Thanks for watching Asymmetric Investing. Please subscribe here on YouTube for all my content. And if you want more from me, check out my newsletter, Asymmetric Investing. There's a link on the screen and a link in the show notes. Hims and Hers is one of the biggest holdings that I have there. Been a phenomenal portfolio. This has been a drag on the portfolio today, but it's been one of the most successful positions in that portfolio. So buy stocks every single month there. Started that from zero. If you want more from me, that's where to get it. And I'm going to be using Fiscal AI throughout this video. This is the platform that I use for all earnings reports, transcripts. All of the information you need is in one place. And they just came out with an enterprise plan. This is phenomenal because it's got 20 years of data. So if you're a professional investor, or if you want to take your investing to the next level, fiscal.ai/ASYM is going to be the best place to start. Like I said, I'll be using this throughout so you can see exactly what the platform looks like. But let's start with the earnings report or the shareholder letter. And let's start at a high level, $545 million worth of revenue for the quarter. That was up 73% from a year ago. So just on that, phenomenal growth. But that's not really what investors are looking for. And investors are looking for how do you compare to your own guidance? And then also, what were the expectations that the market analysts had already put on the stock? I'll get to some of those things in just a second. But let's keep in mind, this is a phenomenal growth company right now. Net income up 220% to $43 million and adjusted EBITDA $82 million. A couple of years ago, Hims and Hers was not profitable, was not even generating positive adjusted EBITDA. So there has been a huge change in the operations of the business. Again, this is one of those things where the context behind the stock really matters. Are you somebody who was buying the stock back in spring of 2024, like I was, before GLP-1s? You may have a little bit different view on this quarter versus if you were getting in late in 2024 when GLP-1s were all the craze. That there may be a little bit more disappointing results if you're a little bit more of a short-term investor there. And then the subscriber numbers, I'll get to these in just a second. These were actually flat, essentially quarter over quarter, but up 31% year over year. And their monthly revenue per subscriber actually down a little bit quarter over quarter too. And here's that subscriber chart that I was just talking about. I think this is where we need to have context on the quarter. So in Q3, Q4 2024 and the first quarter of 2025, that's when GLP-1s just kind of took over Hims and Hers. That became the full story behind the company. But this is not just a GLP-1 company, so we need to have that long-term context in mind. So you look at the year-over-year growth, you're comparing 1.9 to 2.4 million subscribers. But again, quarter over quarter, there was only a small increase in the number of subscribers. The revenue, similar story. This spike that you see here, end of 2024, beginning of 2025, is largely because of GLP-1s. So revenue, monthly revenue per average subscriber declined sequentially, quarter over quarter, but it was actually up slightly from 2 quarters ago and up pretty significantly from a year ago. So in some ways, what you want to kind of do is just lop off some of these numbers from Q3, Q4, and Q1 of 2025, because that was when they were compounding a lot of GLP-1s. So another thing to think about with this is one of the bear theses, and this is what I think the biggest complaint behind Hims and Hers right now, if you're betting against the stock, is Hims and Hers has been compounding GLP-1s illegally, and this is the accusations from Novo Nordisk, but they've been doing that illegally and unsafely. What we're seeing in the numbers is that starting in Q2, this is when they stopped the shortage was over. So they stopped selling those compounded GLP-1s except if they were personalized. So commercially available subscriptions had to be sold with other pharmaceutical products. Couldn't be the GLP-1s that they were selling in the fall of 2024, for example. So it certainly looks like they took a pretty significant hit in those GLP-1 sales because they were not compounding the commercially available option. So on that context, the quarter was a bit of a negative, but I think it actually takes away one of the things that people were complaining about with the company. Kind of sort of eases the legal risk, if you will, that they're going to get sued for doing something that's illegal. They've taken a pretty big financial hit by not compounding a lot of the subscriptions that they previously were. The company remained profitable because they're spending less on operations. Now, there's some good news here and some bad news. Marketing as a percentage of revenue went down. That seems like it should be good, but the growth rate is slower. So Hims & Hers is fundamentally a marketing company. So they need to spend a lot of money on marketing to attract new customers. You're spending less on marketing. That's why you're seeing a little bit more slowing growth. Now, this is not all that surprising because they were very focused on GLP-1s late last year and early this year. Now they're now making a transition to their next generation of products. You still have things like hair loss and ED, but the next generation is going to be hormones, testosterone, estrogen. Menopause is something they're going to be launching soon. So from a marketing perspective, this could be a bit of a calm before the storm. Balance sheet looks really good. That's because they had about $1 billion convertible debt offering that came out during Q2. They talked a lot on the conference call about part of the reason that they had negative operating and free cash flow was they're spending a lot of money on new executives. So let's get to that long-term story and what they're building. The long-term thesis with Hims & Hers is that this is a company that's going to disrupt how we look at healthcare, how we interact with healthcare. Instead of going to a doctor and saying, you know what, I'd like to lose a little bit of weight. What can you do for me? And the doctor looks at you for 30 seconds and says, okay, here's a prescription for a GLP-1. Hims & Hers is trying to build much more of a platform, a healthcare platform. So add wearable data. I'm wearing a Garmin watch right now. Why isn't that data going into a healthcare platform like a Hims & Hers? And that could be heart rate data. It could be blood pressure data. If you're tracking your blood pressure regularly, there's lots of things that we could be tracking over time, but the traditional healthcare system just doesn't do that. So Hims & Hers is trying to build that platform for healthcare and then provide solutions, whether those solutions are a prescription drug, whether it's a meal plan or an exercise plan. So they mentioned on the conference call memberships. Keep that in mind as we go through these next couple of things, because I think that's going to be the future of Hims & Hers. But they're accelerating their flywheel, what they want to do. So trusted brand partner, leading technology. So think artificial intelligence, data-driven personalized solutions and services. So the more things that you can offer customers, the more personalized solutions you'll be able to have. So they added a gummy for female hair loss. Basically, this is just more than one specialty right now with a couple of different product offerings. They want to have thousands of product offerings in the future. That is on the way, but we're not quite there yet. And then higher quality outcomes and clinical excellence. Okay, so with that in mind, these are the three key people that they hired in the past few months. Chief of Operations came from Amazon. Their new Chief Technology Officer came from Cruise. So sounds a little bit weird, but autonomous driving, can't have any deaths, can't have any accidents. That actually translates pretty well to medicine, where you don't want to have any accidents. You don't want to make any mistakes. We'll see how that goes, but I think that was the theory that Andrew Dudum, the CEO and one of the founders of Hims & Hers, said in behind this hiring. And then Deirdre came from Robinhood and actually helped create Robinhood's membership product. That has been a huge driver of Robinhood's success over the past couple of years. So can she help bring some of that magic to Hims & Hers? That's the idea. And this came from the prepared remarks in the transcript. Again, this is Fiscal AI. And one of the cool things you can do is you can get AI summaries of the entire transcript. So if you don't have time to read a transcript or listen to an hour-long conference call, you can just get the high-level numbers here. Look at the guidance. All these numbers are here. Financial takeaways. And they talked a lot about the Zava acquisition in Europe. But this was the big takeaway from me, was they mentioned memberships 6 times in the conference call. So Dudum says, we believe each of these initiatives is laying the foundation for a future where a membership at Hims & Hers will cover the majority of conditions that impact an individual's everyday health. Eventually, we expect that we will transform our platform from a destination where customers come to treat issues to one where they come to prevent them. Alongside these opportunities, our teams are developing technologies and the data platform needed to deliver an increasingly comprehensive offering to tens of millions of subscribers. So about 2.4 million subscribers today. They want tens of millions of subscribers. I'm excited to introduce Mo Al-Shinawi as our Chief Technology Officer, and he is going to be leading a lot of those platform efforts. Talking more about that membership, Dudum says, I think at-home testing, they acquired an at-home testing company earlier this year. At-home testing needs to be foundational to our membership opportunities, and they can provide a gold standard for optimized biomarkers because most of us die from preventable diseases. And here again, that long-term vision of creating a Costco-like healthcare membership that transition patients to coming in for a single condition. So, hey, I've got this issue, go see a doctor, to the ultimate goal of preventative health. So we're collecting data all the time. It's going into something like the Hims and Hers platform and feeding into your membership. And then maybe you get tests every once in a while. You track those tests and how your health changes over time. They can help prescribe pharmaceuticals if that's what's needed, prescribe exercise, prescribe changes in diet. And with a membership, the incentives become very different. A Costco-like membership, Costco makes its money on its membership. That's where the profitability of Costco's business is. They run each one of their stores essentially break even. Now, that's not exactly what Hims and Hers is doing today, but if that's the vision for the future where they say, hey, we're not going to make money on selling pharmaceuticals, we're not going to make money on creating meal plans, we're going to make money on you being a member, and then everything else is going to be basically an at-cost product. That would really change the dynamics for Hims and Hers. So again, that's not where we are today, but they're building that foundation. They're building the capabilities. They've got the compounding capabilities in-house now. They brought in some of those testing capabilities. Peptides is another thing that they've acquired. They're increasing their distribution. So they have the US, they're moving into Canada. They bought Zava to get into Europe, and they're adding more and more products to the ecosystem. So you put all of these things together, and I think Hims and Hers is heading in the right direction. Now, the financial results short term were not phenomenal, and we can't really sugarcoat that. That's what we got in the most recent quarter. Their non-GLP-1 business was essentially flat. Their number of members was essentially flat. So if that continues, or if things start to decline later this year, and I'll just show those guidance numbers for this year, if these numbers, particularly the fiscal year 2025 guidance, starts to come down, that would be concerning. I will also note the Zava acquisition is going to contribute, I think it was $40 million in revenue. That did not show up in an increase in guidance for the year. So that was a little bit disappointing. But if you look at the kind of offerings that they're going to be bringing to market later this year, they're expecting to have more growth, particularly in the fourth quarter. So a little bit of a back-end weighted year for Hims and Hers. But if you see momentum in hormone health and longevity later this year, that's going to be the next growth phase for the company. So these are all the offerings in the US. Europe, big opportunity, not a huge business there with Zava, but can they continue to grow that business into some of these areas that aren't necessarily covered by traditional government-run healthcare systems? So the quarter from Hims and Hers, not phenomenal, but I didn't see any huge red flags as a long-term investor. We do need to get better momentum in the second half of this year, especially as we come away from this compounded GLP-1 confusion, I think, that we had late in 2024 and in early 2025. We're not going to have 100% growth, but I've said on this channel many times, this is a company that can compound revenue 30, 40, even 50% for the next decade or two. That will be a phenomenal investment. And as we're recording here today, stock's not all that expensive. Enterprise value to sales, 7.9 right now. Sure, I'd like to get in at a lower price, but even with the stock at right around $60 per share, not a super expensive stock when you consider the potential upside that you have with Hims and Hers and everything that they're doing, all the hiring, all the capital that they've raised to be able to fund that next phase of disruption in healthcare. I still like the long-term future. Not a phenomenal quarter, so I wouldn't be surprised to see the stock pull back, but I'm certainly not a seller here. But let me know what you think about the quarter from Hims and Hers. Like I said, check out Asymmetric Investing, my newsletter. There's a link on the screen and a link in the show notes. Hims and Hers is one of the companies that I cover a lot there. And if you liked what you see from Fiscal AI, check out fiscal.ai/ASYM. They have plans for individual investors all the way up to institutions and enterprise level subscriptions. So one of these products that I use all the time has made my research life much easier. So check that out at fiscal.ai/ASYM. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you here next time.